now when I look back on it, I think it's almost like I acknowledge it. And I thought in my head, oh yeah, I deal with this so well. Like I can talk about my mum. It's fine. I can openly say, yeah, my mum died when I was 13. And actually I was really just not allowing, I wasn't allowing the emotions to come out around it.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. So Liv Nunn is a divorced single mum and founder of Mums Without Mums, a global online community that facilitates connections between mothers who've lost their own mums. And this is something we're really going to be rooting a lot of our conversation into. And it's a topic that's so important, not just for those who are navigating motherhood without their mums, but it's also really crucial for us all to lean in and listen, because as the proverb says, it really does take a village to raise a child. And when we think to our ecosystem and those who inhabit it, I guarantee it won't be a huge stretch for you to find a mum who's in this situation of navigating motherhood without their mum. Liv is also the head of marketing for a West End and international theatre production company. And I actually knew Liv back in our music industry days, where she was the co-managing director of Island Records. And I was so drawn to Liv throughout all of the time that I knew her in our music industry careers, for really that kindness, that compassion, and just the energy that she brought, mostly, I must admit, into social situations, because we actually work for rival record labels. And it's always a joy to reconnect to truly wonderful people from my past lives. And what I really love is actually finding new interconnections between us that we can explore now. So, Liv and I have been in conversation around that, different, but the shared experiences of grief as we navigated it on the daily. So Liv, welcome to Death on the Daily.
Hello. Hi, Etty.
Hey.
Hi.
Wonderful to have you here.
So nice to be here. No, I'm really grateful, completely feel as you do, to just have reconnected and to be sharing this space with you, and for you to invite me on the podcast and to be chatting and sharing this common conversation. This actually, it's an uncommon conversation, but for us to have shared a common experience of grief that people don't necessarily always have conversations around. And when I saw that you were doing this podcast and started investigating it and listening to it, I was just amazed, and I was so impressed.
It's a joy to have you here. Death on the Daily is about rooting into any and all of the ways that death shows up for us on the daily. But I'd love for you to just share anything that you wish to in this space of your experience with any forms of, death, grief, endings.
Yes, I have been experiencing a lot of endings of late. In the last, what year are we, 2024? In the last 5 years, I have ended a very, very long career in the music business where we first met. And had that shift and gone into a new phase of my life in that sense. I have ended my marriage, which I was with that person for 13 years, and our divorce went through this summer. So that again is another, a new phase of life, and a big, big ending of a relationship that was long-standing. And then what I have realised is that death for me, and this sounds, I don't want it to sound like too big a big weighty statement to make, but actually it shouldn't be, that death for me is present really genuinely daily. I lost my mum when I was 13. I'm 41 now. And she passed away when she was 43. She had a major stroke, sadly, when she was only 40. And it happened as a complete shock. Like there was nothing signified that she was ill at all. She went on a journey. She was Polish. She went on a journey to Poland, and she arrived there and had a full major stroke. I later found out that she should have died then, really. But she pulled through. And obviously I was only 10 at the time, and me and I've got a younger brother who's 4, and we weren't privy to any of this. But for us, Mum had gone on this trip to Poland, and she ended up being there for 3 months rehabilitating. And we weren't privy to anything that happened while she was out there. We weren't exposed to the seriousness of her illness. We didn't understand it either. We were really small kids. We were 10 and 6. But anyway, she recovered and amazingly fully rehabilitated, bar she did have that sort of very, it was a really prevalent stroke. What's the word? After effect that she did have. That's the common sort of much weaker side of her face and body. And she had a condition that was never fully diagnosed, but she had some strange blood clotting disorder, and she, over the next few years, it just got worse and worse, and they were trying to treat her constantly for it, and she had a lot of stays in hospital. But it's interesting because there was never a conversation in those 3 years, as far as I remember, around death or the potential of her dying. And I don't remember a lot of this, and I think that will probably come down to the traumatic element of it, and the trauma that I have repressed quite a lot, probably, of those memories. So I don't remember like the details of those 3 years, but there are certain moments and things that are that I still do have quite strong images of. And I remember that she'd reached a point where she was so weak that she couldn't sort of walk up and down the stairs, and she had to breathe with an oxygen machine, and she was towards the end. But again, we never had this conversation like within our family, me, my brother and my dad. I definitely remember that definitively. We did not ever talk about the potential of her dying. Anyhow, yes, when she came to these like last moments in her life, it was quite uncanny, because when she actually died, my brother and I and my dad we were saying goodbye to her officially, because she was meant to be going for a stay in this residential hospital that was like a half an hour drive away. So we said goodbye, ready for her to go to this hospital stay. And just the next morning we woke up and my granny and granddad were there, and we found out that she had a full like pulmonary embolism, DVT, in the middle of the night, and had been taken to hospital. My dad went, and she died in the night. And it's really surreal for me to tell that story. I don't share it very often, but it feels okay to. And again, I just find it really interesting now that for so many years, I did not ever grieve that experience properly. And I could probably say that I never have, and that actually it's ongoing, and that grief has manifested in so many ways in my life that we can get into, and that I now log and acknowledge has impacted me and how I've behaved and what became of me in terms of forging this real like workaholic attitude, time never, that like as if time deficient, there's never going to be enough time for everything, must do everything all at once, must just fly through. I feel like I flew through my life until probably the last couple of years, And actually, very recently, this is what I was saying about how perfectly timed this experience is with you, because just this summer, just gone, so the last couple of months is the first time I would honestly say in 15 years, maybe even ever, but in a time that I can remember, that I have slowed down to the point where I was staying in bed on my own. I was lying in, my body was actually allowing me to do that. And because I operated on complete super speed. I think I distracted myself away from absolutely everything. When my mum died, it was like a barrier went up, and it wasn't that I wasn't allowed to grieve necessarily. I think the family unit that I was in, my dad really, really, really just did his best. And now when I reflect on it and when I think about what my dad had to endure and what he had to take on in terms of managing his work with 2 kids and trying to sustain a family, a functioning family unit, not knowing my mum had been our main carer. She didn't work. She was fully dedicated and devoted to us, in a way actually that sometimes was, I look back on it, I'm like quite extreme and maybe a bit unhelpful to how I later became, and attitudes that developed of like must do everything, must achieve everything, must, like, you know, typical perfectionist thing of but when she died, it was as if we went through almost like I think maybe my dad had, not that I don't think he consciously had this, but it was like a formulaic, right, okay, we go to the cemetery every Sunday and we grieve, and we go and we take flowers, and every Sunday we would drive there and I would just be bawling my eyes out in the car, like, and my dad didn't know what to do, and we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about anything. And then we went back to my nanny and granddad's and we had a roast, and we didn't talk about my mum. We didn't actively process anything. We didn't talk enough as a family who had lived that experience about what had happened. I am so grateful endlessly forever for all my friends. Some of them I still speak to on the daily, who were there with me through those following teenage years. I was 13, and that was quite a prime time for a female as well to have or not have their mother in their life. And so I'm so grateful that I had all my friends, but there was no processing as a family. There was definitely no therapy. I didn't have grandparents either that were inclined to talk or were encouraged to share their emotions. So yeah, I think I busied myself, and back in those days I got very drunk, even from like the age of 14, or I did that for a lot of my career as well.
Just don't we know it?
I know that, but the numbing, and so it's funny because I just can't believe like how fast I've flown through my life. You know, like I can't remember what film it's in, but I feel like if we did a film of my life, a lot of it would be this huge montage of like super speed clips of me rushing around, dashing off to do different things, to go to different countries, to do anything that I could, be at different events, be with different people, like socialize with everybody. And actually inside there was so much that was like welled up in me that I was not and did not deal with. But it all came back round.
Liv, that's such a profound share. And I mean, I really want to honor you as well for sharing in such rawness the story of your mum, of you at that tender age of losing your mum at 13. Just to check, what's your mum's name?
Oh, Małgosia. So
Małgosia.
She was Polish, Małgosia, which would translate as Margaret, but and people would call her Gosia for short. But Małgosia, and I've given that as my daughter's middle name. She finds it very difficult to pronounce, but she's stuck with it, unfortunately. Well,
Oh, I love
fortunately,
that.
actually, very fortunately.
Thank you so much for sharing so openly. And I thought it was really profound as well, where you mentioned around that if grief has nowhere to go, it still comes out, and it comes out in, you mentioned around that numbing. And I mean, the music industry is a good place if you want to have a jam-packed schedule and be moving. Literally,
Yes.
I mean, I worked in Formula One at the speed of a Formula One car through everything, and going from event to event to event, and then it eventually coming out. So talk to me more about that. I feel like we're going to walk a path, because obviously I want to walk that path to motherhood as well.
Yeah, there's definitely, the path goes there, I think.
Yes.
Because motherhood, my entrance to motherhood is what it collided with my acknowledgement of grief and how grief had been stored within me, and it exposed everything. And so the two are completely intertwined and connected. So I will get there for sure.
Beautiful. And I think as well around that interconnection between all of, birth and death are the two major thresholds in life. And so even just that acknowledgement that actually grief can collide in that transition into motherhood, into matrescence, and actually that's okay, that's normal.
I think grief is always, if you experience a huge loss of, especially a person, I think if you experience the loss of a parent or someone who is or a child, and somebody that is attached to you physically, like somebody in your family perhaps, but you know what, it's loss on any level. I think grief it then becomes like part of you that is actually stored for like forever. Like I think it lives in your mind and it lives in your body, and it's there forever. And that's why, like, back to my original point of how I now have to acknowledge that grief actually has been present in my life from a really early age. Actually, prior to my mum passing, I lost my cousin, and she was only 16 when she died, and she died of anorexia. And we were even younger then. It's just, again, like this tragedy, I will call it a tragedy, is actually one that I would like to work on further in my life, because it was really not addressed, and it's a really like poignant part of my life that has never been, I feel saddened by it, because I do feel as if I talk really openly about my mum, and I'm acknowledging the grief and the impact it had on me. And over the years, I've actually learned so much, and I've been able to express how it has affected me, etc. Whereas actually, but I didn't even used to. Like, when now I accept and I acknowledge and I can talk about the story. Like, when I remember it vividly at work when I was in the music industry, I almost had like this little line that at an appropriate time I'd be like, yeah, my mum died when I was 13, and it was kind of really sad, and or it would just be like, yeah, I lost my mum when I was 13, and that it would just be like a one-liner that, and even just to exist like that within life as you're going through a lot of your career and you're evolving, that's not healthy, I don't think. Now when I look back on it, I think to just have, it's almost like I acknowledge it, and I thought in my head, oh yeah, I deal with this so well, like I can talk about my mum, it's fine, I can openly say, yeah, my mum died when I was 13. And actually I was really just not allowing I wasn't allowing the emotions to come out around it, because if I did, I was in danger. I would have completely stopped, I think. And there were a few times where I probably almost hit that point of, oh, I know that everything's in here, because Grief obviously is a trauma, right? And from everything, all the work that I've done and everything that I've like learned in the last few years mainly, and work that I've done on myself and on understanding my body and my nervous system. And when you have trauma stored in your body, it's cellular, it's on a cellular level, and it affects you in, it can be fully. I went to see Gabor Mate talk last night at the Troxy. So again, just the body and how it can be impacted by the mind and stress. And when your like responses to trauma, again, just learned this through so much therapy, they can be visible. And sometimes they can't be because you're masking them so hard because you're distracting yourself. But you're in your body's in such a high state of stress. Like the sympathetic nervous system is so activated all the time, but you're flying through. I think that was it. I was almost fueled by this constant state of stress, actually, which was actually, I understand now, all fueled by the trauma that was living in me that wasn't processed and that I hadn't dealt with. And I didn't know how to deal. Now I understand, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I know ways to get into my parasympathetic nervous system. That's it, isn't it? To move myself, whether it's lighting lots of incense and lying on the floor flat, whether it's tapping, whether it's really simple breathing, whether it's going out and walking in nature. I take nature breaks. Like, I'm so aware now. But before, like we talked, I literally, what could I do? Oh, I'm feeling it. Right, I'll just carry on, drive. And I will drink, or numb, and that was how I existed and operated for so long. And I didn't acknowledge it. And I would skirt over huge emotional. My therapist actually even said it recently to me. She was like, when you talk about that period and you talk about some of the experiences and some of the like relationship dynamics between you and your dad and your brother and things that have occurred, and you say it in quite a casual manner, and like, how do you feel about that? I was like, well, I guess, and she had to point out to me, she's like, because a lot of people wouldn't sort of accept it like you and think that that was normal or okay. And actually it's really, really emotional and really affecting. And it would have been fine if you'd have just broken down crying in this moment, or, you don't, whereas the way that sometimes I've referenced it or talked about stuff has been so, I just, for so long, I just worked in a way that, and some would call it, I think people thought I was really resilient. There's that word, isn't it? That I held everything together and somehow managed to do that. It was like I had a force field around me that was kind of impenetrable. And I just existed in that way for years. Like, yeah, so many years. And actually, just to go back around to why I was initially talking about that I had managed to get myself functioning and fully like involved in so many things whilst really not taking care of the underlying issues that had got me into that state in the first place. And I had accepted it all and it felt normal, when actually I look at it now and in the place that I'm at now, and it was completely abnormal and very unhealthy.
It's interesting because, when you mentioned around that resilience, it got me thinking back to, so in one of the past episodes, we're speaking with the wonderful Jill Ritchie, and she spoke to herself and how, that, again, that being strong, oh, I'm strong, and that kind of thing of, oh, I don't cry and, I can get through this.
Yeah.
But actually that was completely, again, the wrong thing for her. And she came to realize that too, that she needed that outlet for her emotions. And actually it's interesting that word resilience, because the more that I've read about resilience in sort of my post losing our daughter, and I realized that actually true resilience is really allowing yourself to feel, and then that sort of, I guess, the post-traumatic growth, or, that transformation that can come through you just being able to really root into, I can hold this.
Yes.
And actually I can also really root into myself, my alignment, my purpose. I can receive, I suppose, the unwanted gifts, because we wouldn't want those tragedies to happen, but I can receive with that presence versus, that sort of, I guess, that perspective of, I can, you mentioned earlier around how, you could speak, it's almost that one liner. I can speak to the fact that my mum passed when I was 13.
Yeah, I'm so strong. Look at how I deal with it. And actually, I feel like resilience comes from not tolerating the emotions to the degree that you are not allowing them, but resilience is allowing the emotions and then dealing with them in a way that does not involve really unhealthy habits. And that's resilience. If you can manage to tolerate all of the difficult stuff and find ways to cope with it without, because we know how it manifests in the really unhealthy ways, right? It's addiction, it's self-harm, it's like really, really being completely unloving of oneself. That's the worst case scenarios. And if you are able, true resilience, just again, I think comes from allowing the emotions, being able to process them, express them in hopefully calm ways, or at least sort of nurtured ways, held ways, like in means through therapy or through communities or through, like, I think to actually bring up Mums for Mums, which is one of the things that I wanted to talk about on here, but we're swinging into it. Yes, is so what I found, the reason I was driven to launch the Mums Without Mums network and the Instagram account was because I finally felt ready to share and a need to connect and be able to express some of these emotions that I had been suppressing for so many years around what it felt to be motherless. And to backtrack again, actually, and to talk a bit about how my just how this journey of me into myself a bit more initially started was when I had my daughter. So when I became a mother, and then really actually delved into what it was like to be a motherless mother and what that meant and how it affected me and how it did and didn't define me, because I think it defines me in many ways, but I think they're positive ways. And again, to circle back to all of that story that I just told and felt like I was trying to summarize, but in a very garbled fashion, all of what I was trying to express around my working life and how I was coping, and all of the the high speeds that I was working at, and how I was literally just storing trauma, not releasing it. But you know what? I didn't mention this. I knew that I wasn't completely okay. I knew that I wasn't dealing with it all, because I had moments of such high anxiety that were there in the background. And I did used to, and I talked to, I had, again, amazing friend network. I used to talk to them all the time. I'd always have this undercurrent of like, but again, that's part of the response and the body's response and your physiology and stress and anxiety and everything that was happening. But it was just, I just never let myself fully sit with it. I did not allow myself to stop and for it to take over. And maybe that subconsciously I did know that if I allowed that to happen, there was going to be a huge monumental, pivotal, like, life moment that I wasn't prepared for. But it came, and it was meant to be, and it couldn't be avoided because it came in the form of having a child. And the moment that I had my daughter and I had to be completely responsible for another human being, I could no longer hold myself together in the way that I had been, and everything changed. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Liv, because I think that it's, that acknowledgement at that, in those moments. I think that, if you look on the Instagram versions of motherhood, it's supposed to be, this real sort of everything's picture perfect and everything, but actually it can bring up a lot for anyone, regardless, but particularly, in your situation and where there was that, those emotions that needed to move, and actually that I guess that portal of birth and everything that it opens up.
Yes,
that point,
completely.
It was like you can't push, you can't numb. There's no more numbing here.
And also, and birth shines the light on death, and death is the only, I think you've said it before in a podcast, I've read it recently, and I used to work with Jordan Stevens when he was in Original Kicks, and I went to his book launch recently, and there's this amazing quote in his book right at the beginning that says the only things that you can guarantee in life are death and change. And it's true. It's completely true. And birth shone a spotlight on death for me, because it is that natural cycle of evolution. And I was very, very well prepared in my mind that something was going to happen for me on a psychological level when I had my daughter, that would bring up, trigger, point to my experience of my mum dying, and that there was going to be some sort of research. I was like preparing myself for it, and I thought there's going to be some sort of resurgence of grief. I went to a few therapy sessions. This was another thing that I never allowed myself fully to do. And again, it was just not allowing it into my life. Every few years, I'd start therapy and I would never follow through with it. And I had a few sessions, or I'd get some, privately on my private healthcare and my old job, and I would dabble, but I'd never commit, because it was almost like I knew. And just before I had my daughter, I was having like pregnancy anxiety therapy, and I did mention to them, I was like, I think there's going to be like a well that is connected between the grief of losing my mum and having a child, and I need to prepare for that. But I just could not have accounted for the ways that it showed up, and just how much I finally, and I'm grateful for it now, I actually genuinely am, because it's brought me to where I am now in life, but I could not hold it together anymore. It was like, okay, all of this is coming now. It's all going to flood out. And I had a traumatic birth as well, so that was difficult. And everything just came to a head, and I was like, fine, okay, I cannot just be this pillar of strength anymore that I have masqueraded around in my former decade of work, especially. And and you're suddenly just here with this new little being, and also, but it was very, very apparent that my mum wasn't there. And it was a really tough period. Early maternity was not an enjoyable period for me.
I really wanted to ask you, because I think this is really where the power of community also comes in. And I want to really root into first, I have a few questions here. So I'm going to start with, because I think this is why I'm really passionate about Death on the Daily and everything that you're doing with Mums Without Mums, because what we're doing, us and everyone else in this space who is sharing our experiences, so that we can see that we humans, we're interconnected, and there are shared experiences. There are experiences that others have that, is that kind of typical thing of, oh my goodness, I couldn't imagine what you went through,
yes.
But actually, the more we speak to it, the more that actually we can bring these conversations out of the shadows, so that actually we as humans can build that, I suppose, collective empathy muscle for each other and be able to hold each other in these moments.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would love to hear a little bit more around, I suppose, is there anything in your experience that you could share of, that could help someone? So say for someone like myself, who maybe has a friend who's going through that experience, that transition into motherhood and matrescence and everything that comes up with it, and they've lost their mum. What would you, I suppose, from your experience and obviously the community that you've created, what would your advice be to me who's sitting here going, oh my goodness, how can I support a mum in that situation when actually I haven't been through that experience myself?
It's really basic, in my opinion, I think, which is to really, really listen and to allow time and space for that person to emit what they need to, and almost, without putting pressure on them, encourage them to speak. Because again, going back to everything that we've said, I think that it's too easy to go it alone, or to feel as if, and actually, talking to people that haven't been through the lived experience, I have been there in the past where I've thought, I don't want to like divulge all of my crazy thoughts about what's going on, and I don't think so and so will understand, and I don't want to sort of go off on one about my mom or how I'm feeling with this, because and I think all I can say is just be an open ear and encourage the fact that you are there non-judgmentally, and don't judge, obviously. That it's that simple, because sometimes you just need somebody to talk to.
So for me, I think that what you've so profoundly shared there is just the power of holding space. I think we live in a culture where we want to ground ourselves in action. And how can I solve this for you? How can I make you feel better? What can I do? Versus how can I be with you no matter what's coming up? How can I listen? How can I just, to your point, be that listening ear? I'm just going to listen, whatever you want to share now. And this is a judgment-free zone, so that, as you shared, maybe there is a little step into it.
Yeah, more often than not, we profess that we are time poor, and to allow somebody your time to just sit rather than to fix. Because I agree, I think especially when it comes to talking about if someone's experienced loss, or if they start to talk about grief, like you do all the time, people are naturally inclined to want to come up with solutions. How do I make them feel better? How do I fix this situation? How do I get them well? How do I get them on a path to getting them well? And actually, more often than not, and as I've experienced, that just takes a lot of time. Like, I would say, again, just referring back to my experience, since my daughter was born 7 years ago. So actually it's been 7 years worth so far. And I think I'm actually only on the beginning of my journey to really finding my place within the sort of work on grief, or work around, like the work that you're doing, bringing conversations and connection around big topics like death and loss. It's taken me 7 years to get to a point where I'm feeling confident and comfortable talking about it, and even wanting to curate and hold more conversations and hold my space and my network, like Mums Without Mums. So yeah, it's all about giving people time in the first instance, at the most basic level.
I love that. Giving time and also allowing, if you're that mum, if you're that person who's grieving, whatever you're grieving, giving yourself that space. There's no time pressure. There's no rush. Again, we talked earlier about those time pressures, but I think it's beautiful actually just giving yourself that space and then coming, if that does open up the seed of purpose, which it really has done with you, being able to then say, okay, now's my time where the seed is ready to sprout. And I'd love to really root in as well to Mums Without Mums. And how did that seed come about? At what point did that seed of purpose suddenly sprout within you? And tell me a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah. So as I referenced, I struggled in my first year of motherhood, that maternity leave. Like the first 6 months were awful, practically erased from my memory as well, I think, as far as I can consider. No, but then I started to get to grips with things a bit more, felt like I was managing to balance my time, felt more confident in how I was as a mum. Then I went back to work and I went back to that huge job in the music industry, and very quickly things became imbalanced again. And I knew after, it was about a year, I left after 15 months, but a year in, I was like, this is just not going to be feasible for me. It is not, I cannot function in the way that I used to. I don't want to function in the way that I used to function. I have to acknowledge how, grief and trauma has actually impacted me and the behaviors that it led to and the unhealthy functioning of my system and self that had got me to the place that I was in. But I realized, and I'm so glad I did, that I needed to step out and move forward. And that takes us around the COVID era. So I had left my big role. I was consulting at the time. I was sort of moving myself out of the industry, but wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And during COVID, I'd done a lot of, when I left my old job, I went on a big, I did a process called the Hoffman process, actually, that is quite a transformative week's workshop process where you go and you address your childhood and things that have happened in your childhood. And it's quite it's a week, so it's fast. You can't address everything that's kind of taken place and all the trauma that you might have endured in childhood and process it and deal with it in a week. As I've alluded to, it takes a lifetime, it takes years, it's ever present in your day to day. But when I did that started to prompt me to go, okay, right, I've done a few things within this week which have allowed me to really hold on to the fact that my mother loss is there every day. And I need to involve my mum more in my life. I need to have pictures of her around me. I need to think actually about, I need to allow myself the space to think about her and to, really start to just, make her part of my life. And I discovered this book called Motherless Mothers, and there's also one written called Motherless Daughters by the same author, Hope Edelman. And she's incredible. And I'd read the book and I went online and I found her, and it was as simple as, Hope Edelman has a community. And it just inspired me. And there wasn't a UK network on Instagram. And I literally just one day was like, I'm going to start to make a community of UK mums that can talk to each other. And it's such a beautiful space, and everybody is so open and immediately communicative that I think as soon as I started it and I followed Hope Edelman, she chats to me on Instagram immediately. There's not chats, but as in she's acknowledged that I'm there as Mums Without Mums. And there's just this knowing, I think, when you've got this shared experience of death, as there is in most, it's strange, isn't it? Like, I wanted to call them death communities, but like, it's not, it shouldn't be death. Everybody has experienced and will experience death in their life in some way, not just their own, but all around us, you know, our families, our friends, it's weird, isn't it? How you then hone in on specific death.
It's like put in its own little silo, isn't it? You're over here in this bucket, you're over here, and then there's a group in the middle who are like, oh, not me. You know?
But we could just be talking about death openly all the time, because it happens to everyone and affects everybody in a different ways. And like, you know, I'm not actually special because I've lost my mum. I shouldn't, it shouldn't be some sort of elitist group, the Mums Without Mums network at all. But it's just that I have chosen to spotlight it when actually we all are, and I should acknowledge that now, we all are going to be subject to death, and we all will grieve somebody and many people throughout the courses of our lives. So that's just struck me, actually. It's interesting, isn't it, but not everybody speaks about it. So let's make it more commonplace, as we are now. But
I love that. And also, as I shared because what really struck me when I was thinking about Mums Without Mums and your work was that when I was thinking to my network, and I was like, I know many people who've become parents over sort of the past decade.
Yeah.
But I was like, I couldn't tell you who has lost a parent, you know, and how that might be impacting their journey. And I was like, wow, there is a conversation we all need to be having.
Yeah.
Because actually, as you shared to your experience, something as simple as just holding space can make all of that different on a multitude of layers for that mum, for that
completely,
for that parent. We just need to talk about it.
Yeah. And that's what just became so speedily apparent to me, that there is the need for and real desire for people to be able to communicate with each other and around those emotional like circumstances that they have experienced, with the sense that, because, you know, we discussed earlier and you asked me how you can help if you're somebody who hasn't had that experience, and obviously you can, and there is an additional layer and level to having somebody that has endured or experienced that same loss,
that lived experience.
Yeah, you know, and it is just I've spoken now to so many mums. So I started the network up in 2020, and it was in COVID, and I just felt really compelled to do so. I immediately sort of called out that I'd been inspired by Hope Edelman. And it's funny, as soon as you follow a few people and start to post a few things, that you discover how many, obviously there's so many people out there whose mums have died. It's going to happen to everybody again at some point, but there's different times in your life and different phases, as we've discussed, when that occurs. And so I just quickly had a community start to build. Initially, I was going to try and do it on Facebook as well, but that felt too much. So I started building the community then, and it's grown and grown from there. And I will reference that I had to have a period off of like 18 months where I was going through a really difficult time, and I wasn't able to enter that space, and I didn't actually feel like I could hold the space. It was, I mean, I don't mind referencing it actually, because it's very pertinent to this conversation around death on the daily. But when was it? Was it in 2021 now? I had a near-death experience, one could say. I had a close brushstroke with potential threat to life, because I had a mini stroke in my eye, and it happened so randomly. I just woke one morning, and I had been under quite a period of like a tricky period. My daughter had just started school. I think I was emotionally stressed and I hadn't been sleeping well. And I woke up one morning and I had this like grey patch in my eye and I couldn't get rid of it. And I was like, this is so strange. Like I can't see properly in this eye. And I thought it was like one of those floaters. And no, so all day I was like, this isn't going. And I spoke to my ex-husband at the time and I spoke to my family and they were like, you should probably go and get that checked out. So I went to the opticians, they did a scan. Anyway, long story short, I had a blood clot that had burst in my retina. So it was a blood clot that's traveling to your brain. And if it explodes in your brain, then that is a stroke. But fortunately for me, mine burst in my eye. So I have lost a little bit of vision in this eye, but I didn't lose my life. And but what that prompted was a period of quite a few months where I had a lot of tests, and obviously I was forced to confront that was the stroke was synonymous with my mum and my mum dying. And immediately you go to the hospital to have this eye stroke checked, and they asked me, have you had any history of stroke in your family? So that was just like, oh gosh, here we go, alarm bells ringing. And it really got me. And I had a very difficult period where I was combating like major health anxiety because I just convinced myself that this was what was happening. Like my mum had her stroke just before she was 40. I was about to turn 40. I've had a mini stroke in my eye, and now this is my path to death. And it was, it's funny what the mind can do. And I was absolutely convinced for quite a while that I was on the road to having a major stroke. So that's why I had to I downed tools entirely on anything that was anxiety inducing. And I just came off social media and I thought, I can't hold this space for now. I wanted to be able to hold that space and that community, but I hit a period where I couldn't, and that's okay. But fortunately, I am here. Nothing major post that event happens to me.
As you shared, and I think it's really profound that you shared. Thank you so much for sharing that part of your story, because actually there is that circumstances of how someone passes and how that can also bring up a lot. And actually we as friends can be there for each other to just observe again, where it is that thing of actually, I know that, what on the surface, a lot of people might think, oh, it's just a health thing that you're getting looked at, to be able to just probe a little bit deeper and say, is this bringing, how are you feeling with this? And just checking, is this bringing up anything else by way of those echoes of the past and
how it has, it's happened around a specific date. It's happened around a life phase again.
Yes.
And that's been what's triggered it. And to go, oh, there's a reason for that. It's not just, it's because the time it fell around my 40th birthday. It was and I'm going to have that now. And I'm just taking myself back again to how I wanted to emphasize that all of this comes together, and I hope conveys why death is so present daily for me, because all of these interconnected experiences that I've had have allowed me to acknowledge that I have to, and have now managed to tolerate how, like, my death experiences, that near-death experience, the experiences that I've had around the loss of my mum, the loss of I don't think we'll have time to go into it, but as I mentioned, and the loss of my cousin that was never dealt with and was extremely tragic. Like, she was so young, and awful circumstances. But all these things have been present in my life and affected me in a way that I didn't acknowledge. And now that I've acknowledged it and I've embraced it, and I genuinely feel like empowered by it, and I want to use it as a conduit to other parts of my life beyond my, we have our careers, right? We have our work but some of us, I feel like I've got my day career that I absolutely love. And then I feel like I've got I said to you earlier, like my heart work that I'm also now running in tandem alongside that. And I want them to run. Yeah, I can run concurrently because I want to invest some time in like my Mums Without Mums network, because it brings me the ability to acknowledge all of these things that I didn't acknowledge in life before and have brought me full circle round now. And I want to be able to put them out there and allow others to see, hopefully, how they might benefit from, well, firstly, exposing and talking about their experiences, especially of death and mother loss specifically in my Mums Without Mums network. And yeah, just the strength and power of all of us together collectively talking about it, because as you said, you now know you can point a friend and say, I want to be here for you and listen to you. I've also got a friend who runs a Mums Without Mums network, so you can go and check that out too. And hopefully these little things that they're not little things that we create, these things that we create.
Yes. Significant things that
we create will touch the right people in the right realms in the world. You're never gonna reach everybody.
Yeah, they will. Your ripple effect, Liv. I mean, it's already rippling out there. I know how vast that's going to be. And I think it's really, really powerful, really profound, and so important, so crucial to be having these conversations. And speaking of conversations, Death in the Daily teaches us that everything in life is impermanent, including, unfortunately, this conversation. Honestly, Liv, I mean,
we could go on
until 10 p.m. tonight. But unfortunately, we need to start to bring it to a close. But actually, what I really wanted to root into, so we've spoken to, and you've shared a lot of gems that actually I think for mums who are without mums will be able to take.
I don't feel like I've shared them very concisely, but it's fine.
You have it's beautiful. This is not the space for concise.
No, we don't need to. Exactly.
We don't need to be. It's podcast, and I am definitely I am more suited to long form than I am in the short form.
Perfect. So good.
But
I'm wordy.
It's all good. It's all good. But I would love to really root into Mums Without Mums. I think there's something really profound there of a final word for any mums without mums. I'd love just to hear, what would you say just to anyone who is navigating motherhood, whether maybe at any point, I guess, pregnancy all the way through, what is there any words of advice that you'd share? Let's give a final word to Mums Without Mums.
Allow and accept the anxiety that you feel coming up. Allow it, accept it, and acknowledge it as early as you can that it's real, even though that's scary. Because what I have learned from my engagement with other fellow Mums Without Mums is that we all of, like, I've talked to beautiful authors, I've talked to psychologists, I've talked to, everyone that I have spoken to who is a mum without a mum, all say that they have what feels like a completely enhanced, super duper version of like the general mum anxiety around their kids and their own abilities to nurture them in the right way, to support them in the right way, their worries around their health, their worries around what is right, what is wrong, how they're going to be in the future, a lot of pointing towards the future and what may or may not be. And I would just say that is real. It's real. It's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. And you have to go, you know what, this is here and I'm getting this because I lived, if you lost your mum at a very young age, like I did, I lived with anxiety from actually the moment she got ill and went to Poland and we didn't know what was going on. And that was when anxiety birthed in me properly. And it wasn't even, and I think probably we never talked, like I said, we never talked about death, and we never acknowledged that she might die. So it all felt very, it was just a heightened state of worry and anxiety for so many years, of like the worst could happen, because it like, and yes, so when you losing your parent at a young age in that manner, or well, yeah, that specifically I think might be one scenario which prompts this huge anxiety. Then secondly, just mumming without a mum, I think don't feel ashamed to just say out loud, it's not the same as, it's just not the same. And again, that's okay. And you're not trying to make yourself a victim. You're not trying to make yourself special again to any other mums, because everybody's got, it's all relative, right? Everybody's got their own problems. Everybody's got their own circumstances. But when people say, oh, I'm here for you as well, and you can call me or call your gran, or, you know, you can use this person or that person, I think sometimes it is okay to just say thank you, amazing, but it's not quite the same. And I just need to be with that, or, you know, so, because I, for a long time as well, I almost felt guilty when people were offering me help. You have to ask for help too. So do ask for help.
And thank you so much, Liv, for sharing that. It's so important to talk. Let's talk. Let's hold space. And equally, you know, for any of us, obviously it is wonderful. And, you know, maybe sometimes those offers of help, maybe they will be received, but actually sometimes that's not right. And that's okay. And it's okay if that's voiced. But actually the most profound thing that we as friends can also do is that, circling us back to that holding space, you know, that is the simplicity of that. And even through that can also help you as a friend to understand, actually, now I've really listened, and I can really see, you know, and hear from my dear friend, my family member, etc., what their needs are from them versus me trying to fill in those blanks. So Liv, that's so profound. And final words on where can our listeners find out more about Mums Without Mums, you, and connect in with you and your community?
It's as simple as at Mums Without Mums. I just have the Instagram page at the moment. Everything is there. I do Insta Lives with people that are all still on the page. And yes, no website at the moment. I hope that we will do some more in-person meetups at some point. But yeah, it's all there on Mums Without Mums.
Wonderful. So everyone, go and check out Mums Without Mums on Instagram. Make sure that you do. And actually, I would say as well, you know, by way of this community building and being there to support others, remember that Mums Without Mums is there as that resource. You can always come back to this podcast episode, you know, bookmark it. If you know of someone who's navigating this, or in the future, seek out Mums Without Mums, because it really is that signposting into community as well that is crucial in these moments to support mums without mums who maybe don't know where to go and don't know where they can find that community with lived experience. So thank you so much, Liv.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been good to have such an open conversation, and I hope that I haven't rambled away too much.
It's been a joy, Liv. Thank you.
Thank you.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something get